It's 8 a.m. and Marvin Garcia is hungry. He came to his physician's office today to have a fasting blood glucose test as part of a routine physical examination. In this test, blood is drawn and the glucose concentration in the blood is measured. Marvin isn't worried about the results. He is surprised then when his doctor's office calls him 2 days later and tells him that your fasting blood sugar is a bit elevated. It's 150 milligrams per deciliter, and normal is 110 or more. More and more young people are hearing the same results and being diagnosed with diabetes every day. But most are unclear on really what is happening in your body. Today, I want to review for you the physiology of diabetes. According to the CDC, around 1.9 million people aged 20 and older were newly diagnosed with diabetes in the United States. We can begin to fight this growing epidemic with information on how it happens. To start off with, anatomy means structure and physiology means function. Today, I will share with you a little bit about both, starting with the endocrine system and in specific the pancreas, and how it secretes the hormone insulin. I will also discuss what goes wrong with this function and in cases of type 1 and type 2 diabetes and how they are most commonly treated. The endocrine system uses hormones to communicate with other parts of the body and maintain normal conditions or homeostasis. These hormones will travel in the blood to the place that they are targeting and cause a reaction. The pancreas is one of these many glands and organs that produces hormones, and is where the hormones that regulate your blood sugars are created. The pancreas is an accessory organ of the small intestine, and it's located behind your stomach, and it's about 6 inches long. The pancreas is made up of several different types of cells. According to D. Silverthorne, author of Human Physiology, the German anatomist Paul Lagerhans described a small cluster of cells that he found known as the islets of Langerhans, so the little blue ones, scattered throughout the body of the pancreas. In these clusters, Langerhans found that 70% of the cells were known as beta cells, and they secrete insulin. So how does sugar fit in? Sugars are carbohydrates that you eat are broken down in your small intestine into glucose. Glucose is your body's main energy source. Your cells use glucose by turning it into ATP through cell respiration. Your glucose is transported in your bloodstream after being absorbed by your small intestine, and then is carried through your body to the cells that need energy. However, glucose cannot go directly into your cells without the help of insulin. After you eat, your blood sugars are high, so your pancreas is signaled by your brain to release insulin into the bloodstream. Insulin binds with receptors found on the outside of your cells, on the cell membrane, which signals them to bring in glucose into the cells to get energy. However, sometimes there are problems with these pathways.
For glucose to enter and deliver energy. When insulin arrives, it signals the cell to activate glucose transporters. These transporters pull glucose through cell walls. When glucose moves into the cell, it delivers energy.
However, sometimes there are problems with these pathways. For example, type 1 diabetes. It is thought to be a genetic autoimmune disease, which means that there's a defect in the person's DNA that causes their own body to attack the beta cells that secrete insulin, and so glucose can't get into the cell because there's no insulin in your bloodstream. Also, glucose you absorb just stays in your bloodstream, and your blood glucose levels are elevated. According to the 2011 National Diabetes Fact Sheet, it was estimated more than 25 million people, 8.3% of the population, had diabetes, and another 79 people were pre-diabetic. And type 2 diabetes accounts for 90% of all diabetics. In type 2 diabetes, the insulin levels are normal, but the cells themselves do not have enough receptors, so insulin can't bind to them, and the cells can't get enough energy. And this is because over time, the cells were so bombarded that they took away the receptors because they didn't need that much energy, and once the receptors are gone, you can't get them back. And this is known as insulin resistant. This is a normal cell, has 20,000 receptors, and after you have so much glucose and insulin in your bloodstream for such a long amount of time, it'll reduce to now to 5,000 receptors, and your cell can barely get any energy in. This is why many obese people also suffer from diabetes as a result of overeating. Type 1 diabetes is treated with insulin shots. The addition of insulin in the bloodstream makes up for the deficiency, and energy can get into the cells. Type 2 diabetes has a range of drugs for treatment depending on the specific case. Some increase insulin secretion while others decrease blood glucose levels or reduce the amount of glucose absorbed. However, if diabetes is not treated, serious complications can arise, such as cardiovascular disease and neuropathy. When blood is full of glucose that the cell cannot absorb, the pressure of the blood vessels will rise, and over time, the high blood pressure will cause plaque and will make it easier for clots to form in the blood vessels. This also causes problems because the nerves, especially in the lower extremities, cannot get nourishment from the blood, and so the tissue begins to die because the nerves die, and it eventually results in amputation. According to American Diabetes Association, over time, excess blood glucose that can enter the wall of tiny blood vessels that nourish the nerves, especially in the legs. Nerves send messages to and from the brain about pain, temperature, and touch. They tell your muscles when and how to move. Without treatment, diabetes can also lead to premature death. So now you all know how insulin brings glucose into the cells so they can continue to function, and how diabetes causes this dysfunction in this pathway and throughout your whole body. In conclusion, diabetes is a serious problem in the United States, and the only way we can prevent more cases of type 2 diabetes is by teaching people what happens when you have unhealthy eating and activity habits. Make healthier choices, or diabetes could be in your future.
So Brooke, what did you think?
I really liked your attention grabber. I thought it brought to, like, I knew what you were talking about. You seemed like you knew your topic, and your statement was pretty clear. Your structure and organization was well. The only thing I struggled with was in the beginning, the wording was really strong, but then you showed the video and then it clicked right away. And then something else was you're generally talking to this side of the class only. But other than that, I thought it was really great.
Yeah, I liked it, a lot of the stuff in the introduction, and the story about the guy going in and doing the glucose test, for instance. I think that that's pretty good, and you need to have some more of that kind of thing in the body of the speech, because later on we're getting the clinical discussion. It sounds so mechanical in nature, and if we had an example, you know, like if you were continuing to use the same story about, so what's happening with this guy, you know, I don't remember if he had a name or anything. He had a name, didn't he?
Marvin.
Marvin, you know. So here's what was happening with Marvin. You know, Marvin was eating this kind of food, he was consuming these amounts, and his receptors were working this way. And it would just make it a little bit more interesting and tangible, and a little bit less like we're getting a, like you said, an anatomy lesson, you know, or a physiology lesson. We got to distinguish those two. And I think that would have enhanced the speech a little bit, because you have a tendency, yeah, it's otherwise it becomes kind of dry material, and you don't want it to be that way. You want it to be interesting. I thought you made it relatively clear, and you tried to make it interesting, and you did a good job delivering it for the most part. I know what she's talking about. You sometimes they're off a little bit to the side, and part of that's because you're looking at the notes. However, when you're right front and center, though, that is a little bit of a problem when there's no visual going on because you got the blinding white light in your face, and that happens too. So it's just, you know, technical, mechanical stuff to take care of there that I think you could fix. I thought all the visuals were nicely integrated into the speech. It seemed like you'd planned all of that really well. There's good research in the presentation. I thought that the type 1 versus type 2 diabetes distinctions were mentioned. They talked about, I'm not always sure that, I think you still need to explain a little bit more about how they occur differently, but I know that there was some effort put into that. I might have gotten distracted by something else that was happening that I noticed, so you know, I'd have to look at it again. You should look at it again too. Okay, thank you.